Welcome to INP4. In this video, just a quick video on three issues with TPN, three potential issues with TPN, total parenteral nutrition, to look out for. The first one is refeeding syndrome. So, and this is not just for TPN, this is for anyone who's been starving or been starved of nutrient intake for a long enough period of time. How long is long enough? What this comes down to basically is a close monitoring of electrolytes. So depending on where their electrolytes are at, you want to be monitoring electrolytes really closely once they start to get nutrition put back into them. And typically, if they've been starving a long time and they're not able to eat, then it's going to be through TPN. So let's look at TPN, what it can do, what the issues are around refeeding. The pancreas goes into kind of a restful state when someone hasn't been eating much. And when I say eating much, not taking in much glucose that needs to be brought into cells, this type of thing. Assuming intake is way low, the pancreas goes into a restful type of state. And at the same time, whatever the body's had to metabolize in terms of glucose or glucose stores has used up a lot of these things here, these lights and nutrients, vitamins, whatnot. These things have been used up inside the cells to create that intracellular energy. Okay, so that's kind of where they are when they come in to your clinic or your hospital. That's where they're at. Now, the refeeding starts when we start giving them nutrition. So say we start the total parenteral nutrition, the TPN here. So insulin levels will start to rise a bit as the pancreas starts to come back into action. And what will happen is the cells will say, hey, we need these things here again, these lights, etc. We need these things inside the cell so that we can work with this this infusion of glucose or whatever it is they're getting with the nutrients and whatnot. So we can work with these things. We need these things inside the cell. So it draws these things like magnesium, potassium, phosphate, etc. into the cells so they can metabolize the glucose. So it draws these things in so it can do its work at getting energy. The refeeding syndrome problem is that what you end up with is a decrease of these things in the extracellular fluid, specifically in the vascular space in the blood. Hence, we do the blood work and see, wow, some of these things or all of these things have dropped. Some of them a little bit, some of them more drastically. Potassium is typically a big one to watch out for. Phosphate's a huge one too. But the reality is we need to monitor them all. They all could drop. Now, if they all drop or even one of them drops enough, you end up with muscular, neuromuscular complications. Specifically, the top one that comes to mind is usually your cardiac complications. But it can go so far as to affect the nervous system in general and put someone into a coma. So bottom line, you want to be monitoring these electrolytes and avoid this drastic shift. Well, you can't avoid the shift. You cannot avoid the shift. They're going to go inside the cell, but you want to avoid the drastic drop in the blood levels of these things. And so you're going to need to monitor with blood work and give infusions, maybe top up the TPN each day with what you need to keep these things in a higher amount. Maybe it needs a separate IV of potassium or thiamine or whatever they need, or phosphate. There's a couple ways you could do this, but the bottom line is you're going to need some kind of IV infusion for these things if they're getting low in the blood. Also, you're going to be going slow with the infusions. You'll be monitoring, as we said. You'll be topping them up, as they said. And hopefully in a couple of days, things start to stabilize. Issue 2, fatty liver. So one of the things that we usually give lipids and Travasol, the PowerPoint on TPN kind of goes into this a bit. But the bottom line is they can end up getting quite a triglyceride-rich infusion in the TPN. This can cause fat deposits to begin on the liver. This in turn can cause cellular damage of the liver, and you get the release of those enzyme markers that we talked about in the GI accessory class, or we will talk about, AST, GGT, ALT. You don't have to know what they stand for, GGT, AST, ALT. You don't have to know what each one stands for. You just need to know that what those are they are markers in the bloodstream that are telling you that there's hepatocyte death or damage going on. This could be from the fat deposits. You also might find high blood levels of triglycerides. These things within the context of the patient having started TPN, should tell the nurse and the doc to say, hey, let's look at what's going on with the liver here. Are we giving too much triglycerides or too much fatty content in our TPN, so to speak? All right, the final issue is the hypoglycemia issue. So first of all, let's just talk some basic principles. First of all, the person starts on TPN. When do we want to start weaning them off TPN, assuming that's the eventual goal, which it is for most? When they can get back to taking at least 1/3 of their usual PO intake, then we say, okay, let's start weaning them down on the TPN and let's wean them slowly off the TPN. That's the general rule. So the other principle to remember is that when the person has not been eating or had any infusions for a long time, like starvation state, the pancreas is kind of sleepy, a little bit slow to release the insulin. So now imagine they're starting their TPN just out of starvation. Now they're starting TPN. All this glucose is going into the system. Sure, pancreas wakes up, starts to infuse insulin, so to uptake all that new glucose, but the pancreas is still working pretty slowly here. It's kind of still drowsy and waking up, kind of like us in the morning. It takes a while to get going. It could take days to get going. And so what you could end up with is hyperglycemia. Why? I'll tell you again, because the TPN's coming in at a steady rate. That's your glucose. Glucose is rising in the bloodstream. But the pancreas is still working a little bit on the slow side, not maybe giving quite enough insulin. So that shortfall in insulin is resulting with a decrease in sugars. So we might need to put them on a sliding scale insulin regime. Even if they're non-diabetic, that's what might be needed early on to avoid hyperglycemia. Now, later on, as we start weaning them off the TPN, the pancreas is now by now going in full swing, releasing all this insulin, keeping blood sugars in check, hopefully. And then we start weaning them off the TPN. Why? Because they're eating food. Well, you know that food that passes through the gut ends up getting to the bloodstream a lot slower than straight through TPN. So the bottom line is, however you want to slice it, once you start slowing down TPN, you're slowing down the rate of glucose getting into the bloodstream. So for all intensive purposes, you could say glucose is getting lowered in the bloodstream because it's not getting infused at the same rate as it used to be. But at the same time, there's the pancreas working really hard producing all this insulin. It takes a while for the pancreas to catch up. It takes a while for the pancreas to say, hey, I need to slow down here. It just keeps kicking out all this insulin. And so around about the time we're weaning someone off TPN, they're actually at risk for hypoglycemia because the pancreas is still working strong. But hey, we just slowed down the TPN. You might get some hypoglycemia, so you need to watch out for that and follow your protocols around hypoglycemia. So in summary, early on, you start TPN, you might be looking out for hyperglycemia. Near the end, when they're weaning off a TPN, you're going to want to be looking out for hypoglycemia.